Shields up, Ironbreakers. Rurikhan here coming at you with another video. Welcome back to Monster Hunter Rise, and today I figured I'd dedicate some time to address the complete newcomers to the franchise. With the overwhelming success that we've had with Monster Hunter World, I think it is inevitable that a lot of players are going to be starting their hunting careers with Monster Hunter Rise. And for those players, some of the existing videos that I've been doing or that other people have been doing might seem maybe a little bit too technical, like really just getting down to the nitty-gritty of things, because we've been making these videos for so long that sometimes it's easy to forget that there's a lot of people that might be starting fresh with Monster Hunter Rise. And for you guys, I figured this will be a good introduction with me introducing you to some of the mechanics, what we find appealing about this game, so that you have a better understanding going into it. Because despite what you might think, most people end up not really liking Monster Hunter the very first time that they play it. This was the case for Gaijin Hunter, and this was definitely the case for me. When I initially started playing Monster Hunter Tri, I hated it. I thought the game was terrible. And as a matter of fact, it took me a good long while of playing Monster Hunter Freedom Unite with a friend to really understand what was the appeal of this game and what were the things that people found so interesting about Monster Hunter. So hopefully by watching this video, you get a better understanding of that. So let's start at the very beginning and talk about the gameplay loop of Monster Hunter. Why is it that so many people choose to pour so many hours into this game? And luckily, it's a fairly easy explanation. When you start any Monster Hunter game, you're going to have a hunter who is assigned to a specific village in the universe of Monster Hunter. And usually your job is going to be to preserve the balance between your fellow villagers and nature. Sometimes this means that if there's a monster who is becoming a huge threat to the surrounding ecosystem or the village itself, you'll have to go out and take out that monster. But ultimately, everything that you do is done in the name of balance, despite what some websites would have you believe, that we're basically murder hobos that run around killing everything with a pulse. Now, the gameplay loop itself is going to involve you, as the hunter, going and hunting a monster and then carving him for parts, bringing those parts back to the village, and crafting new weapons and armor, which then enable you to take on tougher monsters and repeat ad infinite. You guys are like, well, that sounds pretty repetitive. What is so special about this that people keep coming back for more? And the reasoning is the attention to detail that the developers place both in the monsters as well as the design of the armors and the weapons, which are quite simply gorgeous. Like, these monsters usually all have specific things about their design that reference real-life situations, then that even make some kind of sense. Like, an easy example that comes to mind is there's a monster called the Royal Ludruth, which has been confirmed for Monster Hunter Rise, and he is this lizard-looking thing who has a almost like a mane on his head. If you go to the website, you can see his picture. I'll try to put something here in the video for you guys to look at. But basically, this is a water-based creature. His natural habitat is actually in the water. However, he constantly comes on land. Whenever you are fighting him, he's usually on land. So therefore, how does he survive on land if he's supposed to be on water? Well, that foamy thing that he's got on top of his head that looks like a mane is actually something that he uses to absorb water, so that when he comes out of the water, that is, sustaining him. Pretty much every single monster in Monster Hunter has logic like this, has attention to detail like this. And then another really cool aspect of it is that whenever you kill one of these monsters and you make his armor and you make his weapon, you can see that monster being reflected in that piece of gear. And that is one of the main reasons why people really enjoy going through this loop. It's basically, a lot of people compare it to a boss rush. I really don't think that does it justice, because when you think of bosses, you think of an arena. And in Monster Hunter, you're actually hunting the monster. So there is usually a large map that you will do combat in, and there will be phases to your hunt. Like, you'll engage the monster. The monster might feel like you have the upper hand, and then you'll run away and you'll have to chase after him. And then a number of things can happen while you are doing this, but basically the gameplay itself is why people keep coming back. The feeling of hunting these monsters is something that people greatly enjoy. So I figure that one of the important things to talk about next is obviously the combat. Now, the combat in Monster Hunter is a deliberate type of combat. This is not the combat that you're constantly canceling animations out of, spam dodging, or anything like that. Even though this is action combat, every single weapon in this game has a certain amount of animation commitment to it, which provides it with a certain amount of weight, which is one of the reasons why one of the biggest complaints that you hear players say the very first time that they play a Monster Hunter game is that the combat feels clunky. That clunkiness that people complain about is the fact that they have to commit to animations whenever they attack a monster. You have to aim the attack that you are doing, you have to make sure that the attack is going to land, and, you have to weigh out whether or not it's a good time to attack because the monster might counterattack you and hit you. And I myself complained of this in Monster Hunter Tri. The very first time that I played, I'm like, dude, this is weird. I can't fight. Monsters keep interrupting everything that I do. I can't hit them. This is weird. This is really weird. And it's like, the combat of Monster Hunter is actually one of its strongest aspects, and it's going to cost, it's going to take some time for most people to truly understand that. Because even in what I would consider to be its most forgiving iteration, which was Monster Hunter World, I still saw several comments from people saying that the combat felt clunky. And the combat itself is not clunky. The people that are saying the combat feels clunky is because they've never experienced the combat of Monster Hunter. Because if you go and you watch like someone that has played the game before, you'll see them play and the combat looks incredibly fluid, the way that they just go through a monster and destroy the monster. Like, it just seems like it flows really well. And that clunkiness that people complain about is precisely what enables that type of gameplay. The animation commitment, both from yourself and the monster, is what enables you to achieve that level of action. It's almost like a chess game in some way. And I know that some of the more veteran Monster Hunter players will hear that quote and be like, chess game, yeah, right. But it really is, because you have to look at the patterns of the monster. You can't just go up to the monster and start hacking and slashing away like a madman. This is not the game for that. Your attacks have to be deliberate, and you have to calculate them in a way that you can actually achieve certain impacts, because when you get good enough in this game, you'll be able to predict when the monsters are going to get stunned. You'll be able to predict when you are going to stagger a monster out of a certain animation so that you can attack him while he's attacking you, and you can break his attack. You'll be able to predict these things because of that deliberate combat. So it's not clunk, it's quite simply unique, and it requires mastery. But when you master it, it is one of the most rewarding combat systems that you will have seen in any video game, regardless of the comments that you will often see from new players of it being clunky. So just think about that and practice it. And at this point, I figured it's a good time to also talk about choosing a weapon. There's 14 weapons in Monster Hunter, 15 if you're talking about Generations Ultimate, because there is also the option of playing as a Prowler. However, I don't believe that is going to be an option in Monster Hunter Rise, at least from all of the materials that they've shown us so far. We haven't really seen Prowler combat. Maybe they will add it. Who knows? Maybe it'll be a surprise. But as of right now, we quite simply don't know. So there's 14 weapons, and I'm not going to be talking about each individual weapon, because the easiest way for you to choose your weapon is to basically try it out. Now, there's a demo right now on Switch, in case you want to, if you're considering getting onto Monster Hunter Rise. I believe that the demo is still available for people to download and try out, and you'll be able to test out all 14 weapons to get a general feel for them. Now, some of the movesets of those weapons are going to change, because this has been talked about in trailers, and I've made video analysis, and I talked about it on the Third Fleet podcast, obviously, with the switch skills and all of that stuff. But the essence of each weapon is usually present whenever you are playing that specific weapon. And even though there are certain things that change, the feel of the weapon is what is the most important thing for you to really understand, so that you get to make your choice. And some people will tell you, oh, but you shouldn't really dedicate yourself just to one weapon because, certain weapons are better against certain monsters and all of that. Yes, that's all well and good. But if you're just getting started, it's a good idea to choose one weapon, which is the one weapon that you kind of fall back on. The weapon that you feel like you enjoy the most and that you feel the most comfortable playing with. And then you can focus on mastering different weapons in the future. But to get you started, to get your foot in the door, and remember that this video is intended for completely new players, I would advise you to basically play all of the weapons that are available in the demo and figure out, this weapon felt a little bit better than the other one. And then pick that weapon up and go again and again. And when you eventually get the game, if you are getting the game, start with that weapon and, get a couple of hunts under your belt with it so that you actually start developing muscle memory and so on. This is something that I would advise every new player to do. Pick up a weapon that you feel is good for you after you've tried all of them. But there's a lot more depth to Monster Hunter than simply picking up a weapon and beating the crap out of a monster. There are certain elements that provide us with almost a layer of simulation in the game, even though this is not like real simulation. These are just things that I consider contribute a lot more to the immersion of this being a hunt and not simply a boss fight. So, for instance, your character is going to have health and stamina, and whenever you perform certain actions, your stamina gets used up, but after you've been for a certain time in a hunt, your stamina, the maximum amount of stamina that you have is going to diminish, and at that point, you're going to have to eat something. Your hunter has to actually eat either a ration or a well-done steak in order to recover some of that missing stamina. And just like that, there are other elements. Your weapon, as you continuously attack the monster, is going to become blunt. It's going to lose its sharpness. And therefore, you're going to be required to sharpen your weapon while you are hunting the monster. These things are elements that require a certain layer of preparation, and you're going to have to gather some of these consumables yourself in order to be able to take on these hunts. And the more challenging the hunt is, the more of these consumables you are going to need. So whenever you are out in the hunt, you might keep an eye out. If you happen to spot an herb, you might want to pick that up, because usually herbs, you can convert them into potions, which then you can, heal yourself by drinking those potions. There's also other things like honey. You can combine herbs and honey through a crafting menu. You can do this pretty much anywhere, and this allows you to make a stronger potion. And there, just like that, there are a ton of other items that you will be able to craft. You'll be able to craft barrel bombs to blow up monsters. You'll be able to craft flash bombs to blind monsters. You'll be able to craft traps so that you can actually trap a monster and be able to deal damage without the monster moving for a certain amount of time. And this adds a layer of preparation. So you're going to be wanting to pretty much pick up anything that you can whenever you're out in the map and you see an item that you can interact with, that you can pick up. You want to make sure to pick that up so that you start understanding, okay, this is an herb. This can get me healing stuff. This is an antidote herb. This can get me antidotes. So in case a monster poisons me, I can remove the poison. And there's a ton of other things like that. Now, these can be gathered while you're out in hunts. As a matter of fact, usually Monster Hunter tends to have these special quests that you can do, where basically your objective is not to kill monsters. Just in case you feel like, oh, I need to go gather things to make potions, you can go on these quests, which you can end any time that you want, so that you can go and collect as many materials as you want. Sometimes you might also want to do this because you need to mine certain ore nodes, which are also important crafting materials, or you might need to go and find bones, which are also important for you to craft armor and stuff like that. So get in the mindset of thinking about picking up things while you are hunting monsters, because, the more things you pick up along the way, the less things you're going to need to actually go out and pick up, have to interrupt your flow of hunting in order to go pick up materials. But just be aware that there is a layer of preparation and gathering crafting materials that you need to keep in mind, okay? On top of that, one of the things that you always want to do before you go out on a hunt, and this is something that you can't experience in the demo, is eating. Usually every village has like a canteen type thing, and obviously the Monster Hunter Rise one is going to be with Dango. We've seen this in some of the trailers. But basically, before you go out on any hunt, you want to go there and you want to eat, because you can get special buffs for that hunt, and you always want to go in with as many buffs as possible, because that is going to make it more powerful. It's almost like a ritual. Before you go out on a hunt, one of the things that you definitely want to make sure that you do is you eat. Now let's touch up on difficulty. And personally, I don't really think that Monster Hunter is a terribly difficult game. If you are struggling, it usually means that you either haven't fully mastered the weapon that you are using, or you haven't gotten used to the attack patterns of the monster that you are fighting. However, having said that, this is assuming that you regularly keep up with upgrading your gear. And some of you might be wondering, well, how often do I have to upgrade my gear? And this is one of those things that doesn't really have an easy answer. This is going to change from hunter to hunter. Better hunters won't have to upgrade their gear as often because they're not going to get hit as often by the monsters. Therefore, they can go in with slightly under-geared equipment and they can still manage just fine. However, newer hunters might want to upgrade more frequently. The way in which you figure out whether or not you need to upgrade is if you start noticing, my hunts are taking a little bit longer. I'm actually carding in the middle of my hunt, which, by the way, for those of you that don't know, carding is when your hunter faints because your hunters never actually die. So if your health pool reaches 0, a couple of palicos go out and they roll you back to camp on a cart. That's what people say when they mean carding. So if you're carding more often during quests, that might be a good indicator that your gear might need a little bit of tweaking. Now, having said that, there's also ranks to each of the quests that you take in Monster Hunter. You'll start things off at low rank, which is the easiest difficulty, but eventually there's going to be a point where you're going to be changing into high rank. And once you start on taking quests that are high rank quests, that is going to be a noticeable leap in difficulty. At that point, you might want to just try and craft the high rank armor as fast as you possibly can if you are really struggling, because quite simply monsters are going to have more health, they're going to deal more damage, and if you go just straight up into high rank with low rank armor, things are going to start getting significantly harder. So that might be another one of those situations where you're like, oh, I definitely feel that now. Yeah, those are difficulty spikes. Now, for Monster Hunter Rise, we should really only have low rank and high rank, and then potentially there might be Monster Hunter Rise Ultimate because this is the way that they usually do their games. Like if you look, for instance, at Monster Hunter World and Iceborne, Iceborne is essentially the next rank of monsters. So Monster Hunter World only has low rank and high rank, and then you go to Iceborne and you have your what they called master rank, but in Japanese is what people refer to as G rank, and in previously Monster Hunter games is what was called the ultimate version that basically also gave you access to G rank. So those are the 3 tiers of difficulty, but for now you really only have to worry about low rank and high rank. Now, another interesting thing while we're on the subject of difficulty is sometimes a fight might seem harder than it initially looks because you are using the wrong equipment. There is an elemental system in place in Monster Hunter as well as an ailment system. So let's talk about those 2 things. Whenever you have a fire monster, by general rule of thumb, you might not want to bring a fire weapon because most likely the monster is going to be resistant to fire. If they follow suit with the same system that they had in Monster Hunter World, you're going to have something in-game called the Hunter's Notes, which will tell you the resistance of monsters once you fight them once or twice, and you will get an idea of what type of element or ailment will be effective against that monster. And this is going to be something that you will want to consider if you are struggling with a particular fight. Are you fighting a monster that is weak to fire or weak to ice? Then maybe craft a fire or ice weapon to fight that specific monster. Are you fighting a monster that moves too much? Consider maybe taking a weapon that has a paralysis status ailment, which is going to enable you to paralyze the monster from time to time. There are an endless number of things that you can do in Monster Hunter, which is one of its most appealing features is the fact that you can do specific builds to defeat specific monsters, and that is something that a lot of us find particularly satisfying. So, if you're struggling, maybe your build's not working out all that well, and at that point you might want to look at a guide, particularly if you're fighting a super tough enemy or something like that. There's usually a lot of content in the community. I know that I'm going to be doing content like that. If players are struggling with a specific monster, I'll be like, okay, maybe try this thing out, try this build out, try this ailment, try this element. And but just keep in mind that usually weapons have ailments and elemental damage, and that is something that you need to take into account whenever you are fighting monsters. There's also other stats in the weapon, which you will come to understand further down the line, like affinity is essentially your critical strike, the difference between blunt weapons like the hammer and the hunting horn, and slashing weapons like the longsword and the greatsword, which is going to be important because, to give you an idea, a blunt weapon, if you hit a monster in the head with it, you can eventually stun the monster. And a slashing weapon, if you hit the monster in the tail with it, certain monsters you will actually be able to chop off their tail, and that is going to give you additional materials. Now, for Monster Hunter Rise, there is something very specific that you have to keep in mind, and that is village quests versus gathering hub quests. Now, in Monster Hunter World, pretty much every quest could be undertaken in multiplayer. So if you were playing with friends, you could go to pretty much any quest and be like, hey, let's go hunt a Brathalos or something. And off you and your friends go on that quest. However, Rise is taking things in a way that is different from Monster Hunter World and is going a little bit back to the roots of Monster Hunter. And there is going to be village quests and gathering hub quests. Now, village quests are solo quests, which means that unlike Monster Hunter World, you're not going to be able to bring in your friends to help you. However, the game does provide you with a robust buddy system, which brings in either 2 cats or 2 dogs, the palicos and palamutes, or 1 cat and 1 dog. You get to choose the companions that go with you into these missions, and you'll be able to customize them in some form. From the footage that we've seen so far, it looks like they're going to be somewhat similar to the palicos that we had in Generations Ultimate, and the way that those worked is, at least with the palicos, you'll be able to choose between having a palico that can trap monsters, a palico that can bomb monsters, a palico that can heal you. So the support skills on the palico is going to be something that is going to be pretty useful for you. And then there's also the Palamute, which looks like he's going to be attacking enemies. I don't know exactly all of the things that the Palamute is going to be able to do at this point. Because Palamute is a first-time introduction in Monster Hunter Rise, but he will let you ride you, which means that you will move around the map a little bit faster. So, that's something to take into consideration, but just keep in mind that when it comes to the village quests, that is just you and your companions, no multiplayer. The Gathering Hub quests, on the other hand, can be undertaken either solo or in a multiplayer environment with your friends or even with random people. I'm assuming that the game is going to have some kind of a matchmaking system so that you can go and match up with other players. At least from the footage that we've seen, it definitely looks like they're doing some stuff with that, and with that cat that is in the middle of Kimura that is going to help you match with other players that are maybe undertaking the same quests as you. And now some of you might be asking, well, can't I just play the multiplayer portion? Because I know that a lot of people prefer to engage in multiplayer when it comes with Monster Hunter, or probably because a friend is trying to get you to play the game with them. And the answer is, I actually don't know, because sometimes in Monster Hunter games, they require to do a certain level of village quests. At least I think it's been like that in previous games. And only then you can go into the multiplayer section of the game. But either way, in getting involved in the single player portion of the game usually unlocks certain rewards that you definitely want to take advantage of, whether those rewards are additional resources for your consumable items or additional meals that you can eat in the canteen so that you become more powerful whenever you go out on a quest. Basically, there are a lot of reasons to engage in the village quests. And even if you're scared of being left to your own devices on the single player portion of the game, the developers have actually said that they're going to make village quests a little bit easier so that you can go through them and then go play multiplayer with your friends if that is your main reason for playing Monster Hunter Rise. But do keep that in mind. These are things that you will want to consider doing. In the same vein, sometimes the NPCs of your village are going to have requests that they're going to ask of you, and usually these requests will involve something like go kill a random monster somewhere, or go pick up a very specific rare material. And usually these are worth engaging in because the rewards might once again be additional ingredients for the canteen, which is probably going to give you additional buffs for whenever you go out on a hunt. Or it might even be access to more consumables. So keep these things in mind and talk with the villagers from time to time. There will usually be some form of an indication, like in Monster Hunter World, you had exclamation marks on top of the villagers whenever they had a request for you. Back in Generations Ultimate, it would usually be marked on your map with a yellow text bubble indicating that there's a request for you somewhere. So keep tabs on that and try to pick up those requests. Sometimes those requests are even things that you can just complete while you're doing another quest, so it's not like they're super hard. And finally, let's touch up on progression, because I realize that this video is actually a lot longer than I intended, particularly when it is a video designed for brand new players. You guys are going to be overwhelmed, and I'm super sorry. But when it comes to progression in Monster Hunter, things are actually pretty simple. You complete quests and you eventually will progress. Each quest is going to have a certain ranking in terms of number of stars. And once you complete a certain number of key quests, which the game determines, I'm not sure how they're going to be showing up in Monster Hunter Rise. I believe in World, the key quests were marked. But in previous games, they did not mark the key quests, so I'm not sure how that's going to work in Rise. But basically, once you complete a certain number of key quests, if you don't know which ones are the key quests, just complete all of them. But eventually they're going to give you an urgent quest. And this quest is going to be a little bit more challenging than the quest that you did before it, because that quest is going to feature a monster from the next tier of quests. But you will want to complete these as they come along, because this is how you start unlocking further upgrades to your weapon, and obviously you gain access to new monsters, which gives you access to new armor sets and new things that you can craft, and basically that's just how you progress in the game. You complete a certain number of quests in the tier that you're at, you complete the urgent quest, you move on to the next tier. And that is kind of like Monster Hunter in a nutshell for brand new players. Hopefully this was somewhat understandable. Let me know any question that you might have as a new player in the comment section down below, and I will try to answer it to the best of my ability. This video was designed as generalistic as possible, so it is not exclusive to Monster Hunter Rise. This can also be used as an introduction to Monster Hunter World, with the exception of the Village versus Gathering hub quests, because they're kind of like the same thing in Monster Hunter World. But yeah, hopefully this helps you out. And if you're someone that has more experience when it comes to Monster Hunter, or you're someone that just is super excited about getting started on Monster Hunter Rise, one of the things that I would advise you to check out is my wire bug guide, because wire bug is going to be a key aspect of Monster Hunter Rise, and I already made a video in going over great detail about how wire bugs work, so that you get all of the wire bug tech possible out of your, well, not just out of your weapon, but just even out of navigating through the map and stuff like that. So I'll put a link to that video in the description of this video if you guys want to check that out. But that is going to be it. If you guys enjoyed this video, hit the like button. If you did not enjoy this video, hit the dislike button, because feedback is important. Thank you all very much for watching. I'll see you guys in the next one. Stay strong, stay safe, peace out.